airline crew throws black woman's luggage. 7 minutes later, discover she's the new owner. What happens when a powerful individual is underestimated simply because of appearances? In just 7 minutes, their assumptions would unravel and their worlds would be turned upside down. This is the story of how one woman went from being mocked to commanding a room and a company. What unfolded during a routine flight not only shattered assumptions, but delivered a powerful lesson in respect and justice. Stay tuned. This story will keep you on the edge of your seat. And don't forget to like and share the video so more people can see it. Remember to subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from below in the comments before going to see how this inspiring story continues. Alana Brooks approached the check-in counter with quiet confidence, her heels clicking softly against the polished airport floor. Her sharp black blazer and neatly tied silk scarf exuded sophistication, but her composed expression carried a hint of humility. She was accustomed to traveling in style, holding a first-class ticket in her hand. Yet even before she reached the counter, she could sense the shift in energy. Pearl's red blouse, first passed custody control a few hours earlier, was lying beside her waiting passport. Behind the desk, Maddie, a young airline staffer with a polished appearance, greeted the previous customer with a bright smile. That smile vanished the moment her eyes landed on Alana. Maddie straightened her posture but couldn't hide the flicker of disdain that crossed her face. She shook her head slightly and spoke to Maddie. Maddie laughed afterward. "Good morning," Alana said evenly, sliding her ticket across the counter. Maddie hesitated just long enough to make her skepticism noticeable. She glanced at the ticket, then at Alana, her lips curling into a forced smile. Denise's trepidation completely subsided. "Flying first class today, I see," Maddie remarked, her tone laced with thinly veiled surprise. "Yes," Alana replied, maintaining her composure. She was no stranger to these moments, where judgment lingered in the air, unspoken but palpable. Maddie turned to her colleague Bryce, a tall man with a buzz cut, holding the ticket aloft as though it required further verification. "Hey, can you check this? Just making sure it's legit," Maddie said loudly, smirking. Bryce chuckled, inspecting the ticket with exaggerated theatrics before finally shrugging and handing it back. "Looks fine to me," he said, still grinning. "Thank you," Alana said, her tone clipped but calm, as she collected her ticket and moved toward the luggage drop-off area. At the conveyor belt, a disheveled crew member grabbed her luggage without a word. He tossed it carelessly onto the belt, causing it to slam onto its side. A smaller bag toppled off, the contents nearly spilling onto the floor. "Excuse me," Alana said, stepping forward, her voice firm but composed. "Could you please handle that with more care?" The crew member barely glanced at her. "It's just luggage," he muttered, scooping the smaller bag up and flinging it back onto the belt. "It'll get where it needs to go." Alana inhaled deeply, suppressing the sharp words that threatened to rise. She knew this battle too well, the exhausting effort of demanding basic respect. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and offered a quiet, "Thank you," her tone betraying no hint of her frustration. As she walked toward the boarding gate, Alana could hear muffled laughter and see sidelong glances from the staff behind her. Her chest tightened, the weight of their microaggressions pressing against her composure. But she kept walking, her steps deliberate, her head held high. Alana knew better than to let their behavior define her. She had spent a lifetime navigating moments like these, and though they still stung, she refused to falter. Quiet dignity was her armor, and she wore it proudly, knowing that respect, though withheld, was never beyond her grasp. Duran stared at her in silence, expressionless. As Alana Brooks approached the boarding gate, the tension in the air seemed to thicken. Her polished demeanor, coupled with the first-class ticket in her hand, drew the attention of Phil, the gate agent. With a robotic rhythm, Phil scanned tickets without looking up, his movements mechanical and efficient. That efficiency faltered the moment Alana stepped forward. "Good afternoon," she said politely, handing him her ticket. Phil hesitated, his sharp eyes narrowing as he examined the ticket. He tilted it to one side as if searching for a hidden flaw. "First class, huh?" he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. His lips tightened and he raised an eyebrow. "Special occasion?" The words hung in the air, laced with disbelief and condescension. Behind him, his colleague Tony snickered under his breath. "Bet she won some sweepstakes or something," Tony whispered, his tone dripping with amusement. Alana's gaze didn't waver. "Every occasion is special," she replied evenly, her voice calm but firm. Phil smirked, scanning the ticket with exaggerated slowness. When the machine beeped green, signaling approval, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Must have been a lucky day," he said, handing the ticket back with a dismissive shrug. Alana didn't respond. She simply took her ticket and walked toward the jet bridge, her fingers tightening slightly around the handle of her handbag. Another bit later, once on board, the atmosphere was no less hostile. The flight attendants, dressed in immaculate uniforms, greeted passengers with bright smiles and cheerful tones. But when Alana entered the cabin, those smiles dimmed. Claire, one of the lead attendants, stepped forward with a clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, may I see your ticket again?" Claire asked, her voice sharp and impatient. Alana frowned but complied, handing over the ticket she had already shown at the gate. Claire scrutinized it, as if expecting to find an error. "You're in seat 3A, correct?" Claire asked, her eyes narrowing despite the bold letters on the ticket, plainly confirming the seat assignment. "Sir." "Yes, that's correct," Alana said, her tone clipped but composed. Claire pursed her lips, hesitating for a moment before finally stepping aside. "Just making sure everything's in order?" she muttered, her voice tinged with skepticism. Alana moved to her seat, placing her handbag neatly by her feet. The plush leather and spacious seating should have been a comfort, but the unease clung to her like an unwelcome shadow. "Tana is ready," she said. Tana stopped and turned. "And what do you have that you think will get our wedding back in order?" As the other passengers boarded, Alana could feel the flight crew's eyes on her. Their glances were quick but pointed, their whispers barely concealed. At one point, Claire leaned toward a colleague, her voice just loud enough to carry. "Probably upgraded at the last minute," she said, glancing at Alana. Alana straightened in her seat, her composure unbroken. She had endured these microaggressions before, the questioning looks, the thinly veiled doubts, the dismissive remarks, but today felt different. Today, she wasn't just enduring, she was observing, noting every slight with quiet resolve. A few rows behind her, the murmurs continued. Alana's ears caught snatches of conversation, including the word "sweepstakes" again, followed by muted laughter. Her heart pounded, a mix of frustration and resolve surging through her veins. She tightened her grip on the armrest, reminding herself of the bigger picture. She had dealt with worse and come out stronger. Today would be no different. As Claire passed by her seat again, Alana offered a polite smile, her expression betraying no hint of the anger simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't submission, it was strategy. Alana knew her moment would come, and when it did, she would ensure it made a lasting impact. As interns on display at the theater, Claire spent daily reminders of that. For now, she endured with poise, her quiet strength shining through the cracks in their assumptions. The boarding experience may have been marred by subtle indignities, but Alana Brooks was far from defeated. She was merely waiting for her moment to rewrite the narrative. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Alana Brooks sat quietly in her first-class seat, her fingers grazing the phone in her pocket. She stared out the window, the endless expanse of clouds blending with the horizon, but her thoughts were elsewhere. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corners of her lips. The humiliation she had endured during check-in and boarding was still fresh, but she knew better than to act impulsively. The standard protocol about light bottles and food containers turned out to be untrue. Timing was everything, and Alana understood the value of patience. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, masking the faint murmurs of the passengers and crew. She had caught snippets of their remarks, the barely concealed judgment in their whispers, the laughter that followed her every step. She had ignored it all, but now, as the plane began its descent, she prepared for what was to come. When the aircraft landed and passengers began to disembark, Alana moved deliberately, retrieving her bag from the overhead compartment and stepping into the aisle with her characteristic grace. She could feel the flight crew's eyes on her as she exited the plane. Their expressions betrayed confusion, perhaps even discomfort. But none of them dared to approach her. At the baggage claim area, the usual chaos unfolded. Conveyor belts groaned under the weight of luggage, travelers clustered around, and announcements crackled over the intercom. Amidst the commotion, a small group of airline executives stood apart, their crisp suits and polished shoes a stark contrast to the bustling crowd. The woman remembered seeing the girl with the short hair coming out of a hotel bathroom, but did not recall by whom she was admitted. Leading the group was Michael Hayes, the airline's CEO, a tall man with graying hair and a commanding presence. He exuded authority, his sharp gaze sweeping the room as he conversed with his team. When his eyes landed on Alana, his demeanor shifted. "Miss Brooks," he said warmly, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "It's an honor to meet you in person." The sound of her name, spoken with such deference, caught the attention of everyone nearby. Conversations faltered, and the buzz of activity seemed to quiet as eyes turned toward them. She promised to bring freshly made fresh bread for all the workers in her group. All but 3 supervisors sitting at the back of the room were mostly busy in their work. Alana shook his hand firmly, her voice carrying a quiet confidence. "Likewise, Mr. Hayes." Her lips. Michael gestured toward a private area near the baggage claim, where the executives had gathered. As Alana walked with him, her heels clicking softly against the tiled floor, she caught a glimpse of the flight crew who had mistreated her earlier. Maddie, Bryce, Claire, and the disheveled baggage handler, Carl, were all standing nearby, their postures stiff and their expressions a mixture of confusion and unease. "Miss Brooks," Michael began once they were in the quieter space, "thank you for flying with us today. I hope your journey was comfortable." "Certainly." Perry's eyes flicked to Michael, then she looked away. Alana's gaze swept over the crew, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. "Comfortable isn't the word I'd use, Mr. Hayes," she said evenly. "There were issues with how I was treated, but I'll address that shortly." The executives exchanged nervous glances, and Michael's brow furrowed. Before he could respond, Alana turned to the crew, her voice steady and deliberate. "Let me clarify who I am and why I'm here," she said, her words slicing through the air like a blade. "I'm not just another first-class passenger. I'm the new majority owner of this airline." The male gentleman said nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Maddie's face turned pale, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. Bryce's jaw clenched, his eyes darting toward Michael as if seeking an explanation. Claire's clipboard slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor, but she didn't move to pick it up. Carl, the baggage handler, shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the floor. He looked as though he wanted to disappear. Alana stepped forward, her gaze unwavering as she addressed the crew. Bryce opened his mouth, but Alana raised a hand to silence him. "Don't," she said sharply. "This isn't about your intentions. It's about the impact of your actions." And the impact was clear. You assumed I didn't belong. You assumed I wasn't worthy of the seat I paid for. Michael stepped in, his tone apologetic. "Ms. Brooks, on behalf of the airline, I deeply regret." "What do you mean, regret?" she said. Alana held up a hand, cutting him off. "Mr. Hayes, I trust you'll ensure that appropriate disciplinary action is taken, but this is bigger than a few staff members. This is about creating a culture where every passenger is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are or what seat they're flying in." Jane's heart sank as she solemnly nodded. Alana finished and waved everyone over until they were left alone around the table. The crew stood in stunned silence, their shame evident in their slumped shoulders and downcast eyes. As it was, Elena took a step back, her voice softening but losing none of its authority. This airline represents more than just a mode of transportation. It's a reflection of the values we uphold. And today, those values were found lacking. "That's going to change," the pilot said gently, as he swung his glare back to me. The weight of her words hung in the air as Michael nodded solemnly. "You have my full support, Miss Brooks. We'll take immediate steps to address this." As Alana turned to leave, she paused briefly, her gaze sweeping over the crew one last time. "Let this be a lesson," she said, her tone firm. "Respect isn't optional. It's the foundation of everything we do." She bowed and left the officers' quarters, scurrying off to close the deck's corridor doors. Continued quiet pervaded the cabin, as the crew watched the naval officers leave. Her tone dimpled as she spoke. With that, she walked away, her heels echoing against the floor, leaving behind a room filled with discomfort, reflection, and a renewed sense of accountability. Alana Brooks wasn't just a passenger, she was a force to be reckoned with, and the crew would never forget it. The class next to them included Grace Monsanto and Steve Grosvenor. And more importantly, the girls were being taken care of. Grace and Montana took. Alana Brooks stood in the airline's executive conference room, her presence commanding as she faced Maddie, Bryce, and Carl. The three crew members were seated across from her, their postures tense, their eyes shifting nervously. They were no longer the confident staff who had smirked and whispered earlier in the day. Now they were subdued, their expressions a mixture of shame and apprehension. "Princess Wishna, that is settled." Alana began calmly, her voice steady and deliberate. "Your actions today weren't just unprofessional," she said, her words cutting through the room like a blade. "They were harmful." The women gasped. Alana spoke first on the matter. The woman frowned at Shuli, Maddie's eyes filled with tears, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Bryce avoided Alana's gaze, staring at the table, his jaw tight. Carl, the baggage handler, looked pale, his head bowed as if the weight of her words was physically pressing down on him. She nodded. She dared not speak. "I wasn't just a passenger you dismissed with your assumptions," Alana continued, her tone firm but devoid of anger. "I was a representation of every person who has ever been made to feel small, disrespected, or unworthy. Your actions today didn't just reflect poorly on you, they reflected poorly on this airline and its values." Bryce shifted in his chair, finally speaking up. "Ms. Brooks, Then she spoke. "Don't," Alana interrupted, holding up a hand. "This isn't about excuses or intentions. This is about the impact of your behavior. You didn't stop to think how your words and actions would affect someone. That is where the harm lies." The silence in the room was deafening. Maddie wiped her eyes, her voice trembling as she said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "I believe you," Alana said, her tone softening slightly. "But intention isn't enough. Accountability is what matters now." Her voice rose to a shout. She turned to Michael Hayes, the CEO, who was seated beside her. "Mr. Hayes, as the majority owner of this airline, I'm making it clear that today is a turning point. We cannot allow these incidents to continue." Hayes nodded. "This came from Michael?" Michael nodded, his expression serious. "You have my full support, Miss Brooks. What do you propose?" Alana addressed the room, her voice resolute. "We will implement mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all employees from the ground crew to the executive team. This training will not be a checkbox exercise. It will be comprehensive and ongoing. Additionally, we'll establish a clear accountability framework to address incidents like this swiftly and effectively," Jeeves said. The executives seated around the room murmured their agreement, and Michael added, "This will send a strong message about the values we uphold as a company." Alana nodded. "It's not just about policies. It's about creating a culture where respect is the norm, not the exception. News of the meeting quickly spread, with journalists capturing the aftermath in real time. Cameras clicked and video feeds rolled as Alana stepped into the press room to address the gathered media. She spoke passionately about her vision for the airline and the systemic changes she was spearheading. "This airline should be a reflection of the best in us as a society," Alana said, her voice echoing through the room. "Every passenger deserves to feel valued, and every employee deserves to work in an environment that fosters respect and dignity." The room erupted into applause as her words resonated with the audience. Journalists leaned forward, capturing every detail, while social media buzzed with hashtags about the airline's transformation and Alana's leadership. Alana and her family were able to get away without bothering the air travel. As the press conference concluded, Alana stepped away from the podium, her expression calm but satisfied. She had taken the first step toward meaningful change, not just for the airline, but for everyone who had ever been judged or mistreated based on assumptions. Through the lenses, Alana hoisted her comrades from the vehicle. In the days that followed, the airline announced sweeping reforms, earning widespread praise. Maddie, Bryce, and Carl were placed on leave, pending further evaluation, and their experiences became a case study for the new training programs. For Alana, the moment wasn't about vindication, but about progress. She had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for growth, leaving behind a powerful lesson. Respect is not optional, it's essential. Alana Brooks's journey wasn't just about her resilience in the face of disrespect. It was a powerful reminder of the consequences of assumptions. From the moment she stepped into the airport to the final confrontation with the airline crew, every glance, every word, and every action reinforced a harsh reality. Respect is not optional. This story speaks to a broader truth that transcends this single incident. Assumptions, rooted in bias and prejudice, can lead to shocking consequences. They can diminish, harm, and isolate others, creating barriers where there should be none. Alana's experience serves as a call to action, not just for organizations, but for each of us as individuals. Her strength and composure throughout the ordeal were more than acts of personal dignity. They were a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. Alana didn't let their treatment define her. Instead, she turned it into an opportunity to demand change, not just for herself, but for everyone who has ever been judged unfairly. Her leadership brought about real transformation. The airline's commitment to inclusivity, accountability, and respect is proof that progress begins when we acknowledge our mistakes and take meaningful steps to address them. Now it's your turn. Reflect on the assumptions you make and the impact they have on others. Ask yourself, are you contributing to a culture of respect and dignity, or are you allowing biases to cloud your judgment? The smallest actions, a kind word, a fair assumption, or an act of empathy can make the biggest difference. Let Alana's story inspire you to be better, to treat others with the respect they deserve, regardless of appearances, roles, or expectations. For more information, listen to Breaking the Surface podcast. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel for more real-life lessons that inspire change. Together, we can create a world where respect is not the exception, but the norm. Hit that like button, share this story, and turn on notifications so you never miss an opportunity to grow and make a difference. Stand unite. This isn't just a story, it's a movement, and it starts with you.